Welcome to NovoEDTalks, where we reveal real-world strategies and expert insights from learning and development professionals. In every episode, we chat with practitioners, course designers, learning strategists, and business leads. We hear about their experiences in the learning industry and predictions for the profession and the trends that they're seeing. But before we get started, a little bit about NovoEd. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithms Lab in 2012, NovoEd is a people-centric, capability-building platform that combines social and collaborative learning to drive performance readiness at scale. Through cohort-based experiences centered around human interaction, NovoEd taps into collective wisdom, placing each learner at the center of perspective, application, and expertise. Large enterprises such as 3M, GE, Marriott International, and Nestle partner with NovoEd to accelerate their critical initiatives, reconnect teams, and achieve rapid alignment through learning that is felt, experienced, and swiftly transformed into impact. Now, let's meet our guest for today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NovoEDTalks podcast, a space for training trailblazers to get real. My name is Melissa Fisk, and I'm the producer of the NovoEDTalks podcast. And today I am joined by Emily Wilson, a manager of leadership development for the American Red Cross. Emily is the manager of leadership development with the American Red Cross Disaster Cycle Services specifically. And in this role, she is responsible for leadership development strategy, programs, and initiatives. Emily has served the public throughout her career through roles in the court system and higher education. Emily has spent the last decade as an instructional designer, trainers, and leadership educator at Appalachian State University and Wake Forest University. Emily, we are so excited to have you on the NovoEDTalks podcast today. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, why don't you start by introducing yourself a little bit more and talking about your role in your company?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you sort of read in my bio, I have had all public service roles, but mostly in the court system in higher ed. And I tell people I'm kind of like I found education later in my career than I imagined I would. I sort of ran away from my educator roots because I thought my mom was a teacher, my grandmother was a teacher, my great grandmother was a teacher, and I thought that's not what I want for my life. But those educator roots just like snatched me back and said, no, this is what you're gonna do because this is what you're passionate about. I started doing some facilitation with support staff in the court system in North Carolina. And they sent me to this train the trainer, and I'm like, this is what I want to do with my life. So I promptly took that education that they gave me and went somewhere else with it, and started working in higher ed. So I did an HR role in learning and development, did leadership development programs at Appalachian State University, and decided during the pandemic I wanted to like really lean into the instructional design space. So I worked with faculty, both at App State and at Wake Forest University. And then this role became available, and I said, I really miss leadership development, and I really miss being the one who does the designing and not just advising faculty. So I wanted to get my hands back in that area. So I love working for Red Cross. It is an incredibly inspirational group of people to work with. Our mission is to prevent and alleviate human suffering. Like, who can't get behind that?
That's amazing.
So I'm excited to talk about how we approach learning and development, specifically in disaster cycle services, because we have such a unique learner audience. We have multiple learner audiences, essentially. And I'm excited to talk about how we're approaching that and how we're adapting our approach to better meet the needs of those learners.
Yeah, that's amazing. Why don't you start by kind of talking about some of those different learner audiences? Like, who are your learners and what are some of the challenges they face?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about doing learning and development for a corporation or a company, you think about your employed workers that you're going to train. But that is only a fraction of our workforce in disaster cycle services. We have between 80 and 90% volunteer workforce. sort of depending on where you are and your area that you're working with. Those volunteers all have to be trained in order to go out and serve during a disaster response. And so we lead disaster response operations. We shorten them to DRO. And I will tell you at American Red Cross, we love our acronyms. So if I say DRO later in the episode, it plays a
Perfect.
big role in what we're trying to focus on at the moment. Um, those are what we would kind of call our operational responders. Those are folks that go out and lead the disaster response. And so they do anything from helping shelter clients to feed clients to making sure that they have a housing solution that they can go back to. We try to help people get back to their pre-disaster sort of state and get them connected with resources so that they don't, not have somewhere to live when a shelter closes. We do lots of preparation for disasters as well. So we have our operational responders, but then we have a lot of volunteers who do what we would call steady state roles. And so they're helping us get prepared for a time when a disaster happens. We also do responses to home fires. And so that's an ongoing need that we have. And most of the people that respond to those are also volunteers. So when you think about how you approach an audience like that, it really does have to be different. You have to think about there's no paycheck that this person is going to get or not get if they don't complete training. They don't have a paycheck just, driving them to show up to work. These are people who are coming out of the goodness of their heart. And volunteers have different motivations. Some of them do come because they want these career building experiences, but most people come because they just want to help.
Yeah.
And so when you think about what that audience needs, it's going to be very different than the people who are sitting at their computer 8 hours a day or in an office 8 hours a day.
Get paid
But yeah, I know.
completely different.
But they still need to be able to do jobs
Yeah.
and able to do jobs under a lot of stress. So that's a little bit about our audience. We have a lot.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm so excited to talk more with you about this just because it's such like the motivation, just all of the, kind of psychological factors are probably completely different for how you're approaching some of these challenges. But that being said, I feel like they could be taken in a very creative way and adapted like for many organizations. So let's keep going. And why don't you talk about some of the biggest kind of workforce development challenges and how you approach them with these types of groups?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we as you can imagine, the volunteer audience, not having they have truly like intrinsic motivation to show up and do work. That means they also have to have intrinsic motivation to participate in training.
Right.
And there are a lot of places where, if you're looking at doing training as an employee, like if you're looking at a paid workforce, they're probably to some degree, there's like a 50-50, right? You want to learn because you want to better yourself, but you also want to learn because it's going to help you grow. It might help you get a promotion, right?
Yeah.
We do promote people. So Red Cross does an amazing job of finding opportunities for people to move up in their responsibility level. So we have folks come in at what we would call our service associate level is kind of the entry level position. And then we give them lots of opportunities to take training and to move up into the higher roles. And so it goes, to supervisor, and you get all the way up to people who are in job director is what we would kind of consider like the CEO of a disaster relief operation. So there's a lot of places for people to grow. One of the challenges that we're having now, specifically in terms of leadership development, isn't that different from what other workplaces might face, which is that we often promote subject matter experts, not people who have the perhaps leadership development, interpersonal skills that they need to lead a team of people. And so going back to that idea of, if you have a workforce and your supervisor is maybe not as skilled as they should be at leading people, you still have that reason to come back because you need to pay your bills. If you don't have that motivation, and you're a volunteer and you come to a disaster relief operation, whether that is to do a short shift of a few hours in a day, or to do a 14-day plus deployment working 12-hour shifts. I mean, I'm telling you, our volunteers are such great people. But if you come and do that and the person leading you does not make you feel like you're welcome and doesn't give you what you need or make you feel safe or any of those things, you're probably not going to come back.
Yeah.
And volunteerism has changed a lot. So we can't afford for folks who are interacting with supervisors who are not as skilled as they should be to
Hmm.
have those experiences and not come back. So that's a big challenge. The way we are addressing that is we are revamping all of our supervisor training at the moment. Supervisor and manager. So manager's the next level. And we're trying to move beyond this idea that just because you know the subject matter, so just because you know how to open a shelter, that also means that you can lead other people in the opening of a shelter and the running of a shelter, right? That does not mean that those two things are not one-to-one. You need the interpersonal skills. You need the understanding of people's motivation. I mean, you need to understand why volunteers are showing up and what they want to get out of their experience. So it's very, very different. Just because of the way volunteerism runs, just because the like, generational differences play a role in that as well. Um, I think we're going to see some big shifts probably in our just our landscape in general as a country, as you know, economic things as those change.
Hmm.
Obviously, in disaster cycle services, we're also dealing with challenges related to climate change. We've moved from an environment where we kind of have a disaster season, like a hurricane season and a wildfire season. Yeah, we don't have that anymore. We have huge wildfires in January. We have
Yeah.
a tropical disturbance out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in March. I mean, it's just we've moved into what we call an era of continuous response. So then if you're looking at needing to have a trained workforce for an entire for being able to respond continuously, you need more people, you need more trained people.
Yeah.
You need to have capacity built in a way that's more for preparedness for when you need it, because you're probably going to need it more often. So it's become challenging, and one of the ways that, like I said, we're looking at that is how do we make the experience between a responder and a supervisor better? How do we make sure our supervisors are more prepared? So that's a lot of where we're putting our effort at the moment.
Wow, huge challenges. And I'm sure just, to your point about like, maybe you can run this disaster relief program, but like the connecting with the people and handling the people and how they're handling what they're doing, being such intense work, like how are you got to learn how to navigate that and people's emotions and response to that as well. I mean, that is tremendous. Wow. Um, so kind of talking about, how, getting more into kind of some of these programs, as kind of skill sets needed for success continue to shift with kind of everything that's evolving and like in this kind of continuous response mode that you are all in. What strategies does your team use to ensure that the workforce is remaining, or volunteer force, I should say, remains adaptable and prepared for everything, for anything and everything, especially.
Yeah. Well, we've always done a really good job with a lot of training. There is a lot. And we have taken a very traditional approach to training, which is you get all the information that you need, right? But we can't, like, what we know about cognitive science and the ways that people learn and the ways that they're motivated to learn, and the ways that they're going to retain information, is that a fire hose approach is not going to work, because if you have that approach, you're maybe getting, like, if you're lucky, you're remembering 50% of what you learn in
Right.
that kind of a situation, right? Well, what helps you learn it is applying it. And we do give people plenty of time to apply what they learn, but we do it in a place that is full of stress. I mean, again, this is just for our operational people for the most part, but we take them from, we've prepared you with a lot of information. You should have all the information that you have now, or that you need now, but now you got to go and apply it, and we haven't given you an opportunity to do that yet. So we're trying to work a lot around creating authentic learning experiences that are active, that let people apply the knowledge instead of it just being like a content dump.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's hard because we are a very small team and we have constant changes in what we need people to know and be able to do. And we work with our subject matter experts. We call them like activity leads. And they're where we get most of our information. So like in terms of how we measure whether training is effective, we get that information from them. And they don't always, they know their activity. Like there's a big parallel for me with this in faculty when I used to work with faculty. They know so much about their subject matter. They don't know how to teach it.
Yeah.
They don't. I mean, some do, some have really invested, and they were the ones I love to work with as an instructional designer. But many of them don't. They're just not taught how to teach. And so we need to do some work as an organization, and we're in the process of doing this, of helping our activity leads and just anyone that works at Red Cross understand what is the responder experience and what is the client experience. So we've already done our client journey mapping, and we're going to start socializing and internalizing, understanding our personas of our clients. And that's going to help our activities really understand how they deliver their services in ways that honor the client. But we also are going to do the same thing with our responders. And so understanding, what does that experience look like from coming on, getting trained, going out, deploying, experiencing that, 2-week deployment, and then how you adapt back to your life after that. And so I think we're going to understand a whole lot more about what our responders need in order to address kind of that challenge and help people from a training perspective specifically, how to make them more confident in the ability to do that job when they get there. So I think what we're going to find is people need more opportunities to apply what they're doing. They need to do more exercises. They need to do more simulations, more role plays, which I know people hate. I don't love a role play either, but especially for some of these things where they're really crafting the experience for a responder, like supervisors, they need to know how to navigate situations that are not black and white.
Yeah.
And we don't really give them a chance to do that. So I think we will have to. We're not going to have a choice.
Well, and the stakes are so much higher in what you all are doing. So it's, like you
Absolutely.
and like you said too, with the need for more volunteers, it's like you really need to make sure that the experience goes smoothly that first time.
Yeah.
So how do you currently how does your team assess and address, skills gaps in kind of training folks? And, like how do you kind of do you have a way that you can stay agile in all of that with everything changing constantly?
I would say we probably don't do the best job of it. And part of that has to do with the fact that we don't really assess what we are teaching the way that I feel like we should. And I know I come from higher ed, so I have a natural inclination toward assessing in more depth than probably most people who are just in a corporate training environment. Like I have a very different view of what assessment can look like in an authentic way. So we aren't really doing as much of that as maybe we could. Our way that we know now, if people know whether they're doing their jobs well, really comes down to how the activity leads, as our subject matter experts, are hearing from the field, and that is across the nation about how their activity is addressing challenges. So it really is hard. It's hard to know what we should do without good assessment. And I think that's something that is on it's on our horizon. I'm hoping with our supervisor training to sort of have an assessment plan that gives us an idea of somewhere to work with. And then that maybe we can scale to the rest of our training. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you, talking about kind of like assessing and measuring things, how do you currently measure the effectiveness of your programs? Can you? And are there any kind of like core KPIs that you can have that you kind of monitor and report on?
This one's tough because I think it, is sort of similar in the answer to the one before, is we really don't do a great job. We're working on revamping our entire performance evaluation process, and I think that's going to help us a ton. I work on a team, and part of our team is responsible for updating this and really re-envisioning the process of doing performance evaluation. It might seem odd to people that we would do performance evaluations on responders, on volunteers, but how else will we know
Yeah.
if someone is well suited to a leadership role, if
Yep.
someone is in need of additional development, or if they really aren't suited for the role they're in and should try to do something different.
Mhm.
And what we find is just the same thing. I used to manage performance management for Appalachian State for our whole university. And we had the same issue where people don't do reviews. They don't do their performance reviews unless we like hound them and say, I mean, some people do, some people really understand like how important feedback is, but a lot of people don't. And I could always tell, like when I called a supervisor, if they hadn't done their reviews, their review also had not been done, and their boss's boss hadn't done them. And so it was like this trickle down, but we're
Yeah.
making it a whole lot easier. And that's going to help us measure, are people prepared? Are they doing a good job? Are they promoting? Are they in roles that they feel like they are well suited for and can do the job? So yeah.
That's awesome. You've talked a little bit about like your supervisor and manager training. Is that an initiative, or do you have another initiative that you could share or talk about that you're really excited about, and maybe talk a little bit about how you're approaching it? Sounds like you have a lot of
Yeah.
exciting
Yeah.
stuff on the horizon.
We do. So we're at a really great moment too, because the whole organization really is, including like our HR, learning and organizational development team, and our volunteer services team. They are all looking at this issue of supervisor training because, again, it's so important. I mean, we know your immediate supervisor really, really affects it. I've seen different statistics, but it's like 70% of the difference between engagement, right? And
Mhm.
so if your supervisor's bad, you're not going to show back up for the next job, or you'll refuse to work with that person, or you'll just leave the organization altogether. And we just cannot do that. So we are all tackling this problem. For us, what we decided to do, we had a really long supervisor training, and just like most organizations during COVID, we said, let's find a way to do this virtually. And so we had this training, and it was like designed to really touch on all aspects of supervising in the disaster context, including our steady state. So it was trying to do too much. It was just trying to do too much.
Yeah.
And because our HR counterparts and our volunteer services counterparts were really talking about more of those steady state skills, we said, let's really focus this in on how to supervise on a disaster relief operation. And we'll limit our audience to that. I mean, if other people want to take it, they can, but this is our audience we're really talking to. And we said, there's two things we want to do. One, the feedback that we heard was people really they want to shadow a supervisor. They want to just like follow along a supervisor. Well, you can kind of do that on a DRO if you get a good supervisor who's willing to include you and kind of mentor you, right?
Mhm.
But if you are in an area that you don't deploy as often, or you don't have as many local disasters, and it's just harder for you to get out nationally, you may not get that experience. And so we really wanted to put people like on the shoulder of a supervisor. So we took the first part of our training, which was technical skills, like understanding your role, the stuff you're going to have to do, not any of the interpersonal stuff, but like just the technical stuff that you need to understand. And we want to put them on the shoulder of a supervisor so they can like see the whole journey as a picture. And so we crafted a web-based training. It's just 1 hour long, which is long for a WBT, but it's not 8 hours long like what we had before. And we said we're going to talk about just the technical skills here. So I'm excited about that. That should be coming very, very soon. We're in our final stages with that. But we said, all right, we do still need, we have all this interpersonal stuff that we're not addressing in any way. And we've got to make sure that we are talking about those things. And so we created an virtual instructor-led training that's just interpersonal skills. And all of our examples are things you might have happen to you on a DR, or things that I know have happened because I was like there. And I saw it happen. And so we're pulling those from the headlines and giving people an opportunity to learn with other folks about how they would address that situation. So I'm really excited about that. I'm hoping that it is this month that is released before we really hit the craziness of hurricanes and everything over the summer. So
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. You talked a little bit about like a web-based training. Are there certain, and doing things virtually, are there certain technologies that you use, or what role does technology play in your programs, and how do you leverage specific tools and platforms to kind of enhance these training experiences?
so in terms of technology, we like I mentioned, we're a very traditional organization. We have not done as much maybe in the innovation space. I think some of us individually and like with different activities are using some different technologies. But the one I would say that we are exploring the most right now is micro learning. And part of that is because our learner audience is, I mean, it's just shifting a lot. And they don't want to sit in hours worth of training. And they want things that are quick. And they need things when they're in the moment. So one of the things I'm hoping to do is actually launch micro learning during DROs for supervisors. We're hoping to kind of pilot this idea and see if it takes hold. It may be a little bit of a lift to try to see if people are willing to take their time in very hectic situations where you may not even have time to eat
Yeah.
to do like 3 minutes of learning, but we're hoping that we're able to get really, good buy-in. I've not had anybody say, oh, absolutely, I wouldn't do it, or I wouldn't have I wouldn't, talk to my supervisors about doing it. So we're hopeful. But I think micro learning it's just crucial. I mean, like here's what we know. 91% of adults in the US own a smartphone. And how many times a day do you think they check it?
Yeah.
144 on average. So they are there on their phones already.
Yeah.
Why are we not meeting them there, right? Why are we not putting learning literally at their fingertips on their device? So I think that's one way that we're going to start, putting our energy in terms of technology, is how do we meet people where they are and give them the most important, most pertinent information that they need at the time that they need it.
Yeah.
Instead of expecting that they're going to remember a class that was 2 or 3 hours long that they took 6 months ago. So hopefully very soon.
Yeah. No, that's great. And you could see how that would be incredibly effective, like the point of when they need it. It's very different to be taking some training, sitting at your computer, and then being in a, you know, DRO situation and having to respond to different things that are coming up, and like how you have, I'm sure your mindset completely shifts, from those two environments.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that being very effective for you all. Um, for our next question, this might go beyond just your role at American Red Cross right now, and talk a little and maybe touch on some of your experiences in higher education. But as kind of learning and development and mentor programs have rapidly evolved over the past 5 years, what are some key takeaways that you've seen?
So I think for me, the biggest one I see, and maybe that just this is really hitting home for me because I feel like our volunteer audience is like we have to meet them where they are, sort of like I was saying with the last conversation part of the conversation. I think we have to rethink how much time we need, how much information that we need. And I think most of what we know about cognitive science and the ways that people learn and the understanding of what they're going to retain is telling us people are not going to be passive receptacles for information. They probably weren't ever, but they definitely aren't now.
Yeah.
And their attention spans are so much shorter.
Right.
So you really have to figure out how you're doing that, how you are also making training have value, showing that it has value. Like we fundamentally understand you need to have training to be able to do your job. But when people don't necessarily see the direct connection from the knowledge to the doing, I think they can kind of just feel like, oh, this is a bunch of information that I'm probably not going to remember, and this was a waste of my time. Our data doesn't show that people necessarily think that, but I don't think we crosswalk the actual skill, the knowledge to the skill, and we've got to do that. And that's not just in Red Cross; that's everywhere.
Yeah.
You don't get a chance to actually apply what you learn. You're just not going to remember it. We know
Yeah.
that about whether you're a college kid or even when whether you're a middle school kid. You've got to like wrestle with the knowledge, right? The learning is the journey. We need to really understand that about people.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of on the flip side of that, how are you looking at tech? I mean, you talked a little bit about it with meeting people where they're out on their phones, but how do you think, leveraging technology will kind of enhance employee experiences over the next kind of 5 years?
Mhm. Well, I think micro learning is one. I sort of already have talked about that. Again, we got to give people small chunks. We got to give stuff that they can digest. The other thing is, and this is gonna sound counterintuitive, perhaps, but I also think we just need to have better strategies when we teach people in person, and that's not necessarily a technology thing. That's an understanding how to how people engage in a social learning process.
Mhm.
And so we've always done a pretty good job, and we make sure in almost every case. There are a few cases where you just have to do the class in person,
Yeah.
because you can't get a similar experience. Uh, we've done a good job about making sure people can learn together, but making sure whether they're learning actively um, is not always something we do. And so I think where we can leverage technology is having a little bit of a hybrid situation where people do pre-work, and maybe that's through micro learning modules, maybe that's through listening to a podcast. Maybe that's through a series of videos that we send them. I think we could utilize video a whole lot more than we do.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's also about like one of the things that we do, and this is part of my supervisor training initiative that we're doing. We used to give people these participant guides and say, like, print this out and take this with you. And it's 15 pages long and it's just all text. No one is going to do that. No one does that. People don't print the internet. I mean, we may have some folks who do, uh,
Yeah.
from certain generations, but people don't do that. They want to have the information at their fingertips.
Yeah.
So we're working on having toolkits that are accessible very, very quickly. Like literally, you can go from our responder app to find this toolkit that you might need, and it's going to have the processes and the procedures and the forms, but it's also going to have here, you need to know how to delegate well because you're not delegating well. You're trying to do everything on your own, and all your volunteers are standing there looking at you. Here's some things that you can do that are practical. So putting information closer to people's ability to access it is going to help for the things that they need a refresher on. It's going to help for the things that they need to be reminded of or that they forgot, at the time when they need it. So again, I think it's really about how are you using things. And I know that's not a revolutionary tool for most people that you probably have on this who have a little bit more like larger teams and more investment in technology. But for us, just that idea of saying like people will go find the information on their own and can do that. Most people have a level of digital literacy now that they know how to go search for stuff. But if it's not there in a way that's easy for them to get to, they're going to get tired. They're going to get sick of it. They're, 3 clicks, right? They're done. So just thinking about like how we're putting the information out there for people.
Sure. I mean, I think that's sure maybe a basic thing, a basic concept, but I think even more so as technology changes, as we get more apps, more tech, more, whatever, that's going to really stay at the root of it. So I still think that is very, very important.
Yeah, I think it's basic, but it is, it's thinking about how are people having the best experience and the most intuitive way to access what are very complex procedures, because we have a ton of, we call our like procedural guidance doctrine. We have a ton of doctrine because all of our different activities that we engage in have their own set of doctrine that they use. And so making it so it's just easy to find the stuff that you need is an ongoing, it's something we worked really, really hard on. Our doctrine team is amazing. Like, shout out to them. They've done such a great job with making this lots and lots of words make sense.
That's awesome. Emily, to close on a positive note, what's the most important lesson you've learned as a leader that you would pass on to someone just starting out on their journey?
Oh man. This may sound like a little bit silly, but I think it is, and it's not necessarily related to anything Red Cross or learning nerd-ish, although I am definitely a learning nerd. But it's more like philosophical advice for life. One is, you can't, like, you don't know when you're a young person what your life will hold for you. Like, my journey to get here has been so wild. And whenever I talk to people who are like budding instructional designers, they're like, okay, so I'm doing this and this and this and this thing, and is this going to get me where I want to go? And I'm like, I don't know. That's not how I ended up here. I just said, I'm drawn to this idea of helping people learn, and like that's where my spark comes from. And so it was just finding the opportunity, right?
Mhm.
Along those lines, the second part is that you can't miss your boat, right? You can only miss somebody else's boat. Yours is going to stay at the dock. It's going to stay. And this is a famous quote by someone, I'm not even sure who it is, but I like hold it really close to my heart. It is, you're not able to, I mean, like, the opportunity for you will be there when it's there for you. And you'll know when it's the right thing. You'll know when it's the right time. And just keeping moving forward. All of that is what makes you a valuable learning designer, because you've learned, like, you've been iterative in your own life, in your own career, and you've said, I'm going to look for the right opportunity. So I always tell people, whenever I'm talking about like career advice or life advice, just know you can't miss your boat, right? There are, yours is going to stay there until it's ready for you.
I love that. I saw something recently online that was just talking about like like famous people and these great accomplishments that they've done and the age that they were at when they like actually did it. And it's, you know, some people are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even
Yeah.
like when this like big moment for them happened. So
Yeah, I mean, nothing that I imagine for myself as a young person is what has come to be, but I'm so fortunate.
yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say like reinventing your career in the middle of a pandemic is the best idea, but it worked out fine for me. I mean, it was a nice foray into working with, with learning in a different way. And now I'm back working with leaders. And, that's really where my heart is, because I see so much potential for growth in individual people. And I know that like not everybody is made to be a leader, right?
Yeah.
But I think that you can build leadership skills and you can make yourself the best leader you can possibly be. And that is an ongoing transformative journey that is not a sit in a class and you've
No.
learned everything, right? You got to keep on engaging with it. So
100%, 100%. Well, Emily, thank you so much for joining us on the NovoEd Talks podcast. It was such a pleasure having you on and hearing about this incredible, important work that you're doing. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
you are very welcome. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to another episode of the NovoEd Talks podcast.